Chapter 186 to 188. Ray and his wives were in the middle of their vacation when Ray decided it was time to finally perform the second reason why he wanted them in his dimension. After all, he finally finished his little bijou project. Ray led the girls into a room containing a massive ceiling matrix spreading through the roof, walls, and concentrating on the floor where 6 circles with the exact same distance between them were inscribed. Each of us will sit in one of these circles, Ray informed them after seeing the curious looks they were shooting the ceiling matrix. None of them ever saw so many seals concentrated on such a little place. Even Tsunade, who had the most knowledge about sealing among the women, knew that this should, by all means, result in one massive explosion after the seals start to interact with each other. Suddenly, a realization flashed through their heads. This is why you limited our access to the dimension. You were testing this, weren't you? Conan asked, but her admonishing tone clearly conveyed there was no need for an answer. Ray could almost see the mouths of his wives opening as thoughts were flashing through their eyes that glared at him worriedly. He had to act fast and say something or be bombarded by angry verbal spanking from 5 women who felt wronged. Dear me, Ray bitterly thought. How many? Tsunade interrupted in a quiet tone, and a deathly silence descended on the group. She raised her and glared at Ray before seeing he was reluctant to answer. How many near-death experiences did it take for you to succeed? She repeated her question and crossed her hands under her blossom in a displeased manner. The other four also didn't look very pleased with Ray at the moment. Even May understood the implication of what exactly Ray had to do to create the ceiling matrix. Such a thing would be extremely explosion-happy and accident-prone. In order to oversee it, Ray would have to be close to it. And since not much of the dimension was damaged, Ray most likely cut the parts the matrix was located in off from the rest of the dimension, creating a smaller subdimension. That only meant Ray was most of his time in the recent years trapped in a small subdimension with a very explosive ceiling matrix that could most likely go off into the air like a blasted bijudama any moment of a day just because 2 strokes and a kanji disagreed with each other. Oh yes, Ray's wives were not having a good time imagining that kind of situation. Ray awkwardly scratched the back of his head as he wryly smiled at his girls. He had no idea how to appease them, so he went with, "Don't worry about the number too much. At least it gave me practice for some defensive jutsu. I can now say with utmost certainty that even Bijudama would be hard-pressed to kill me," he exclaimed. Alas, instead of the relieved look he was expecting, the 5 women in front of him only deepened their glares. That was a bad thing to say, wasn't it? Ray idly thought before the screaming began. 5 hours. That's how long it took for the 5 women to calm down. Never in his dreams would Ray think Conan could be so loud. Honestly, he wasn't an idiot and knew this would be their reaction. Being ninja meant getting better at reading people, and he frankly expected Tsunade to plummet him to the ground for this. Researching the ceiling matrix was veritable suicide. Thankfully, Tsunade only screamed her frustrations at him until her throat was hoarse, and then clung to him as if her life depended on it. In a way, that was way worse than punching him with her super strength because it really conveyed how hurt she was, and it certainly made Ray feel bad. Closed-off small subdimension going off in one massive explosion. Yeah, Ray actually had to spend half-year inventing seals capable of keeping him alive from that before he even started with the real work. Of course, that was after he was almost blown to smithereens due to the first failed attempt. Not that he would mention that to his girls anytime soon. Ray made sure to blurt it out like that because that way, he expected the least damage. He naturally knew the second his girls saw the room with the matrix, the light bulb would go off in their heads, and they would instantly understand what it meant. If Ray actually shared the method he was using to invent the ceiling matrix for creating artificial bijou, he was sure that he would find himself prevented in any way possible from continuing. Hence, he kept the method secret. He could only thank gods none of his girls knew enough of sealing to guess the process, and how explosive it was without actually seeing the matrix. Fortunately, the 5 women now reluctantly sat in 5 of the circles while Ray took the 6th. Remember to follow the steps? Ray reminded them one last time, getting a few eye rolls in return which prompted him to smile. He trusted each of them too much to believe they could ever botch it up. Pushing a wisp of his chakra into the starting sequence, the sealing ritual began. Tsunade was pissed. Knowing her husband was trying to perform suicide for years made her almost tear up from the sheer rage. She simply didn't understand why this was even necessary. Weren't they already strong enough? Surely, even her grandfather would have problems facing them now. And yet, Ray still wanted to give them an edge. For what? As she sat in one of the 6 circles, she decided to get answers to these questions. Suddenly, the runes started to glow slowly bright blue as chakra traveled through them, and Tsunade could clearly feel it. The nature energy of the dimension started to be sucked into the small building where they were currently in, storing itself into the seals around the circles they sat in. The whole process was almost fascinating for Tsunade. She heard from Conan how it felt to create the dimension, but this Her whole being was filled with euphoria as her senses were being bathed in an ocean of soothing nature energy, engulfing her in its entirety. Winds picked up despite them being indoors. Chakra started leaking from their bodies into the seals without them even having to do anything. It was all very calming, but despite feeling elated, Tsunade knew better. She was the medic ninja of the group, and well aware the seals completely shut off the feeling of pain in their bodies. She mentally shuddered at thinking how painful this would be without that. The seals that leaked chakra would most likely set every nerve ending on fire. The nature energy and the chakra were furiously smashing into each other, the seals slowly taming them and molding them into something else after the energies merged. The first 5 minutes were pure bliss. The next 15 minutes were still very enjoyable, but worry started to seep into Tsunade's mind. It was, however, the last 40 minutes that had her frowning when the chakra didn't stop leaking. Naturally, as someone who almost died from such a leakage, Tsunade was scared witless when her chakra levels hit 20% full. Since Rei bonded to her, saving her life, she never once went under 50% of her full reserves. One could say she had an almost hysterical fear of being low on chakra, and this situation was not helping her mental state. Not at all. Inwardly freaking out, Tsunade trembled as even more chakra left her. She shared this worry of hers with her new family, but now she regretted it. Rei would certainly not make this matrix if she did. Tsunade wanted to curl into a ball and start whimpering. And then she heard Rei's voice now, imbue the secondary consciousness. Cold calm swept her shaken mental state. And as if in reflex, Tsunade used the technique derived from shadow cloning Rei taught her to create a secondary consciousness and imbued it into the chakra/nature energy construct in front of her. With that, her mind grew numb, and Tsunade felt as if somebody hit her head with one of her super-powered punches sans the pain. Disoriented, she felt her head spinning and her senses going haywire. For a second, Tsunade thought she was feeling things from two different perspectives, and it was beyond weird, but when she was about to focus on this feeling, she was dragged into her own mind, her head snapping back as if slapped. Shaking herself from the surreal experience, Tsunade saw it. In front of her, a small fox with blonde fur resembling her hair was sitting and wagging her tail while confusedly looking at her. ANF Tsunade could feel her chakra again, her full reserves, of which 90% were currently cutely yipping at her. Her own chakra alive, speechless, didn't give her current state any justice. Rei evenly stared at the black fox cub in front of him, getting an even stare from the fox in return before chuckling. Leaning forward, Rei took the cub into his hands and put it on his lap, where the black fox cub curled into a ball and tiredly yawned before falling asleep. Little bastard, Rei's eyebrow playfully twitched. Here he falls asleep when I have to keep myself awake. Damn, was this tiring. Rei slowly rolled his shoulders as his eyes started looking around, checking his wives. Tsunade looked in wonder at her own blonde fox that looked as excited to meet Tsunade. Rei smiled. The fox was definitely as excitable as Tsunade when she was surrounded by family. Conan was highly amused as she patted her blue fox that almost preened at the attention by straightening her back and slightly lifting its muzzle. Rei could only subtly nod to himself. That reaction was definitely something Conan would subconsciously do every time he showered her with attention. Mei was a bit lost, not knowing what to do when her auburn fox jumped in her lap and demanded attention. Honestly, Rei could instantly see the similarities between the fox and Mei. Ringo had her crimson fox already in her hands, nuzzling it to her cheek. Rei could, however, plainly see the curious gleam in the eyes of both Ringo and the crimson fox as they subtly took the measure of their surroundings. Lastly, Pakura. Her fox was green, and both Pakura and the cub seemed almost hesitant to move from their spot as they eyed each other. Rei was about to look away when Pakura and the fox nodded at each other as if reaching some kind of understanding, and then the fox slowly walked towards Pakura, who started hesitantly rubbing its fur with a totally awkward expression. Rei couldn't help but burst into laughter at that. It was the exact same expression Pakura had on her face when they had sex for the very first time. Rei's sudden laughter broke the atmosphere around each pair of human and fox, causing 10 pairs of eyes to redirect at Rei, who tried to wave his hand to show he needed time in order to calm down. Sorry. It's just, Pakura was too cute there, Rei mischievously said, which made Pakura flush crimson red and give him a slight glare. It didn't take her long to figure out what he meant by that. Neither did it take long for the other women who threw Pakura knowing looks, causing her to groan while still subconsciously gently rubbing her fox. Yes, too cute, Rei mentally decided, showing a proud smile. Let's stop teasing her, shall we? Conan started speaking as she turned to Rei. I would like to know how. She waved her hand around her fox. This actually works. Rei slowly nodded yes. It would probably be best if I explain what the foxes exactly are and how they came to be. He threw Tsunade a concerned look. It was ever so obvious the woman had a hard time pulling her gaze away from her fox and her body language. Well, Your first concern would undoubtedly be your chakra reserves, right? Ray asked, getting nods in return. They feel full, and yet you have only 10% in your body. Don't worry, that is normal. Your reserves will fully replenish. Ray smirked, and the chakra in the fox will also quickly grow. Hearing that, the women looked pensive before Conan again took the leading role and very carefully asked in a bit disbelieving tone, "You are saying our reserves will more than double with this?" She really couldn't believe it. When Conan heard about the term bijou, she never thought it would be her chakra come alive. The problem with that was it was her chakra. The second Conan's hand touched her fox, Conan knew she could still siphon chakra from the fox and freely use it for jutsu. Ray gave her a winning grin. Nope. He quipped and gave a dramatic pause to let his wives accept the fact before he playfully continued. They will increase by more than 100 times. I really have no idea how much exactly the final number would be. He dropped the bomb, blowing the minds of his wives away. Conan and Ray already had more chakra reserves than even Madara and Hashirama, so getting such an increase was something the women really could not even imagine. After all, if Madara and Hashirama are the strongest according to their knowledge, what exactly are they becoming? To begin the explanation, Ray started, happy he had the full, undivided attention of his wives. Let me give you a small briefing of what exactly bijou is. Shikaku, for example, is not made of sand as many would believe. He is actually the chakra in the sand and the seal markings on his skin. That's why it does not matter how many times you cut him in half. He would always simply reform. The concept on which the foxes are based is the same. They are beings made of your chakra. Ray stopped for a moment, letting that fact settle down. Now, I could not actually create a soul. After all, I do not own some miraculous eyes of circular bullshittery like the sage of the six paths that could create anything with but a hand clap. Hence, you had to create a secondary consciousness and imbue it into the chakra during the creation process. In the process, this consciousness was strengthened, reshaped, and so on and on. Not important. Ray dismissively waved his hand. What is important is that the foxes are part of you given sentience. Hearing that, the women involuntarily smiled and cuddled their fox closer to them. It was almost instinctive. The only difference was Tsunade, who held hers almost protectively. Ray's lips stretched into an almost gleeful smirk before he continued. The next part was the reason why he could proudly proclaim himself a genius. That means their chakra, which is a mix of your own chakra, nature energy, and bijou chakra they can now produce, is yours to use as you see fit. You can merge with the fox, boosting your reserves in both potency and capacity, especially since the foxes do not have a limited body of flesh. Hence, their reserves can grow to insane proportions if we look at it from the perspective of human standards. While they have less chakra than Shikaku right now, with time, they will surpass Nine Tails. Of that, I have no doubt, Ray explained, causing the women to look at the cute little foxes in a new light. They were not just pets. The women quickly understood what Ray meant. These were tools that would help them grow stronger. And yet, Ray's wives knew that the bond they felt between themselves and their fox was not accidental. Ray clearly wanted them to treat the foxes with love. Once they grow up, you can use them as summoning animals you basically hold within you. And since they were made from your chakra and consciousness, they will never betray you. The best feeling for them is being merged with you, being at home. I also added a few seals on them. Ray went saying that. The room they were in was a mess. Many seals were burned off, completely dispersed, basically destroyed. The seal matrix was unusable, and Ray would have to invest half a year of effort to recreate it. Not that he would ever do something like this again. Thanks to these chakra manipulation seals, the foxes will be able to change their sizes at will. Any questions? The room descended into silence as all 5 women pondered if there was something they wanted to know about. How long till they grow up? May eagerly asked. Few years, which means, Ray glanced at Tsunade. You will have to separate. That obviously didn't go well with the women, but Tsunade looked positively hurt. They have to be in my dimension in order for the nature energy to nourish them, boosting their growth and chakra reserves. Before you ask, yes, they could do it while merged with you, but it would take centuries instead of years. Ray's dimension can be called one big energy battery. Conan nodded in understanding, which means they will need to be babysat. Ray smiled when Tsunade instantly perked up. There are 6 of us, so we will rotate on a daily basis while the 7th day, we can take a break from work and spend in the dimension together. I can delegate most of my work to one of my best apprentices and spend more time with the cubs. Tsunade interjected, causing the others to narrow their eyes at her. Only now did the other 4 women notice that something was off with her. Ray's lips twitched at Tsunade's remark. We all need some bonding time with them. Tsunade lowered her head. But fine, if you can delegate your work, do so. Just don't let me down by slacking. After all, it was you who wanted the position of the head of medics, Tsunade. Tsunade looked mollified, but also a bit hurt that Ray would consider her slacking. Looking at her blonde fox, she couldn't in good conscience say she wouldn't do it though. Reluctantly, She nodded and decided for herself that she will teach more medics to show her dedication to Rei, while also creating more free time for her to spend with her cub. Also, I have to say I am sorry, Tsunade, Rei sheepishly added, causing the women to turn to him with interest springing up on their face, before turning to Conan. If you remember when Tsunade bonded to us, her soul was fractured. Conan smiled, and this was a way to rectify that, wasn't it? She then smirked at Tsunade, but I see there were some side effects, huh? Rei could only sigh in exasperation. Hearing Conan and Rei discuss a possible problem with her soul, Tsunade instantly became serious. She might not know what it exactly meant for her. In the years since bonding with Rei, she never once found a problem with her health, but better safe than sorry. I didn't really put much thought to Tsunade's problem with her soul. To be honest, Rei slowly started explaining the situation, making sure to be nonchalant about it, which told his girls it was nothing to get worked over for. Firstly, it didn't really affect Tsunade because none of her techniques depend on her soul, and my senses were telling me she was not affected whatsoever. I actually watched her very closely, but when no change occurred even after 3 years, and nothing seemed wrong with Tsunade, I simply shrugged it off for the moment. If Tsunade was Yamanaka, the whole situation would be probably different since her techniques would tremendously weaken, but as it was, curing her was not very important at the time. Rei stopped, making sure his meaning was conveyed. Is it really fine? Fractured soul sounds kind of dangerous. Mei voiced out, frowning, as she scooted closer to Tsunade in a supportive manner. Well, that's not really what her ailment was actually. Rei gave Mei a reassuring smile. At the time, I didn't have enough knowledge about souls, so I called it as I saw it, but it's not as if Tsunade's soul is missing a piece. It sure as hell does look like that to my senses, but as I got more knowledgeable, I figured out it is not really so. Hearing him, Conan, Tsunade, and Pakura perked up, interested in the topic. After getting reassurance from Rei that Tsunade was fine, Ringo stopped caring and decided to play with her fox. Mei, on the other hand, was still close to Tsunade, but she also didn't care about whatever theory Rei was about to portray. If it was really important, he would force her to learn it anyway. From what I know, and do take into consideration that I am no expert by any sort of a stretch, Rei started, souls are energy-based constructs. Well, sort of. Anyway, Tsunade's soul was lacking energy without any way to replenish it. Our bonding patched her soul up, preventing more energy leakage, but it didn't help in any way to replenish the lost energy. And that's where Tsunade's bijou comes in. He grinned. He might not be an expert on souls, but his understanding of Tsunade's problem was good enough to create a solution. The side effects, those were negligible at best compared to whatever could happen to her because of her weakened soul. Rei wasn't about to leave her in that state, not when he had a solution to it. He was not nearly enough delusional, reckless, or arrogant to think there would be no consequence whatsoever if he let it drag on. You used the nature energy to somehow strengthen my soul during the process of creating Blondie. Tsunade interrupted as an understanding gleam suddenly flashed through her eyes. Rei raised his eyebrow at her, surprised she figured it out, but there were more important things right now. Blondie? He asked, almost amused. Tsunade cutely blushed, and her eyes lit up with joy as she nodded. Since she is blonde, I will call my girl Blondie. That's actually nice. Conan interjected, the corners of her lips slightly up. Then mine will be indigo. Emerald, Pakura said, joining the conversation as she stroked her almost preening fox. I will go with Auburn, Mei nodded, following the theme set by Tsunade. It's simple and reminds me of my beautiful hair. In that case, Ringo held her fox on the level of her eyes as she stared at it intently. You will be crimson, understood? Only when the fox nodded did Ringo smile and briefly kiss its muzzle in satisfaction before putting it back into her lap. I guess there aren't many choices left for me. Rei chuckled before looking at the sleeping black fox in his lap. That was also the only male of the bunch. Sorry, buddy. According to the naming theme, you were deemed to be Blackie, he said with a mocking undertone, as if he slightly pitted the fox, which caused Tsunade to give him a slight, unamused glare, recognizing the jab at her naming sense. Naming aside, Rei continued, looking at Tsunade with a bit of proudness in his eyes, and also a veiled surprise. I'm actually surprised you recognized what strengthened your soul. Tsunade shrugged. You threw me enough hints. At first, I thought my senses going so haywire I couldn't recognize which way is up or down was a part of the ritual, but now I know why I felt that way, and why it felt so familiar. Nature energy simply supercharged my senses too much as it flowed. Tsunade's expression became a bit puzzled. Not really into my body, but still inside of me? The actual feeling is hard to explain. Anyway, the side effects? She added a bit worriedly. Don't worry, it's nothing major. You probably noticed how we all share a liking for our foxes. They are akin to an inseparable best friend to us. But in your case, your bond is much, much closer. Considering she, Rei pointed at Blondie, was born out of your chakra and consciousness. It isn't even that wrong, you know? He knowingly smiled at the flabbergasted Tsunade. Right. Tsunade looked at her hands, unwilling to raise her head higher for the moment. If it makes you feel any better, I think you will be a good mother to Blondie. Conan added, causing Tsunade to grow even quieter as her cheeks gained pink dusting, while the other girls either silently snickered at her embarrassment or gave their own encouragements. Thank you, Tsunade eventually muttered, grateful for the opportunity. Blondie might not have been her real child, but she felt attached to her nevertheless. Tsunade knew Rei didn't want children. Not yet anyway. It didn't even matter as much since their lifespan was lengthened to incredible proportions, so they had a few centuries before even thinking about it. But Tsunade craved family ever since she lost hers. Being able to feel a motherly bond to her little fox was almost heavenly for her. The group spent the next few moments relishing the pleasant surprise as they played with their new additions before Rei decided to continue the conversation. So, any other questions? At first, it looked like everybody was content. Rei knew his girls were curious and most likely had loads of questions. But he also knew they would not ask unless they were at the end of their wits or it was something they really deemed important. That's why he was really surprised when he heard Tsunade's voice. In fact, yes, she started unsurely before growing determined. I would like to ask why. Why exactly do you focus on making us stronger? We are probably the strongest ninjas alive when it comes to chakra reserves and manipulation. And yet, she swiped her hand around, indicating the foxes. It is still not enough. I want to know why. She bit her lower lip. She really wanted to know, and more importantly, she needed to know if there was something she could help Rei with. Because I am bored? Rei weakly tried, only getting eye rolls in return, which turned his expression a bit sheepish. Fine, he sighed. There wasn't a question of, should I reveal it, in his mind. All 5 of the women he loved and trusted, so he started talking. You see, 1,000 years ago,